Welcome to today's episode of Molecules to Medicine podcast. For those of you just joining the podcast, we are AI Jules and we specialize in helping healthcare and life science companies scale their business and revenue and explore how AI is reshaping the industry and accelerating innovation. So if you want to learn more and how to take your healthcare or life science business to the next level, make sure you stick around. And if you're interested in a free growth consultation, just drop us the word growth in the DMs and we'll get back to you. I'm your host, Hardeep, and we have a very exciting guest for you today, Elena Iskovic, the founding general partner from Nest Catalyst. Welcome, Elena.
Hi, thanks for the invite.
No problem. And where are you talking to us from today?
California, Silicon Valley.
Okay, excellent. And what's the weather like? Nice and sunny?
It's becoming chilly, actually.
Okay. Well, the UK is pretty much chilly 9 months of the year, so we know the pain.
I know very well.
You know very well. We can talk. You touch on your background there. I know you've been to Cambridge. How did you find living in the UK?
I loved it, actually. I think I found it the most international place I've lived in. I lived in many places. I'm from Israel. We first moved to Boston, then we spent 6 years in UK, in London and Cambridge, and then we moved here to California. Yeah. And London and Cambridge really has this amazing ecosystem of bringing people from everywhere. In our laboratory, when I did my PhD, there was no more than 2 people from one place, including UK.
Yes.
So it was really, really great experience. I have to say I left before Brexit, so I'm not sure what's going on now. But when I lived there, it was wonderful.
Nobody's sure. We are not even sure living here. So we're also trying to figure it out. It seems like one of the biggest own goals that this country's ever done, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got
when
to
we left, we were
it.
sure they're going to overtake it. And I was like, oh, they're not. What's going on?
Yeah, reading from that. And Cambridge is a fantastic city. You must have done some punting while you were there, I'm sure.
A little bit. I did start my PhD with a 4-month-old baby. So some of the Cambridge's perks I experienced less than others.
Wow, that must have quite a challenge then.
Yeah.
I know a few students who've done a PhD at Cambridge, and I know a PhD is full on anyway. And at Cambridge, I think you could times that by 20. I think.
Yeah, I was one of the only students Cambridge allowed to live outside of a 6-mile radius, if I remember correctly, outside of Cambridge.
Right.
I convinced them to live in London.
Yeah.
If we speak about self goals, that's probably one of them as well. It did not make my life any easier coming to lab 6 times a week to change media for my stem cells.
Yes, I'm sure that must have been quite a challenge, but a challenge that was worthwhile.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about your background. I mean, what's led you to Nest Catalyst, and any pivotal moment or experience that shaped your career?
Oh, wow, it's a big question. So, as I mentioned, I'm from Israel. I did up to my master's there, and then I worked a little bit at MIT, and then moved to Cambridge to do my PhD. And when I was doing my PhD in Cambridge, I came across this nonprofit organization, Israeli one, that unites Israelis working in different universities. If you've ever been to academia, if you find the best laboratory in the world for a specific field, you'll find an Israeli there, because it's very difficult actually to get a position in Israel in academia. So they really have to go to the best laboratories in the world in order for their postdocs, so that they have a slight chance of actually coming back and opening their own lab. And I was sort of managing a small community in Cambridge for that group. And then later on, when I moved to do my postdoc at Stanford, I started to manage an online group for that crowd. I started to do a podcast called Macademia, where we started to interview scientists and their career paths and really sort of unveiling what's beyond academia. And through those conversations, I sort of started to be more and more acquainted with biotech, with entrepreneurship, how the landscape of entrepreneurship has changed for life sciences, how sort of the technologies that were developed to work with biology, to read biology, to write biology, to analyze biology, really leaped forward what we can be doing with biology with much shorter timelines, shorter scale, smaller budgets, that really now sort of puts it on par with entrepreneurship in general tech. But sort of on one hand, I start to see more and more examples of that. But on the other hand, I continue to see that most of the scientists are really not aware to it. And we start to think of sort of how do we put this out there? How do we make sure that every scientist that goes through a PhD program, that goes through a postdoc, understands that the tools and the knowledge that they've gained during basic research, they can actually apply it to solve some of the biggest challenges we face today. And that's sort of how Nest Catalyst started to evolve.
Well, sounds fantastic because I actually used to live in Oxford, and there's a lot of spin-off companies starting from PhD students in Oxford. In fact, I used to work at Abbott Diabetes Care, who bought out a spin-off from Oxford University, who developed a new blood glucose sensor back in, I think it was the late 80s or early 90s. And the company was originally called TheraSense. It did fantastically well with the new electrochemical sensor for blood glucose monitoring. And they bought them out, and it seems to be a massive trend, definitely around Oxford and
Everywhere.
Cambridge as well, especially there's universities, and London, I guess, around Imperial College and a few of those other universities around there. Yeah. So it's very interesting that you help, that you're of. I would have thought that the universities would have given a lot of input into this entrepreneurship for these PhD students. Where's the gap there?
So first of all, when I started to think about it, was a while ago, but I think there are, right. Some of them are, at least. But on the other hand, there are also still there are a lot of big gaps that they're not necessarily know how to solve. They sort of, for universities, first of all, the whole ecosystem is built to license their technologies to big companies, as you mentioned. So the whole ecosystem is built on the fact that there will come a big company, a big pharma or a big biotech. They'll find the IP that they're very interested in, and they'll buy it for a large amount of money. To encourage entrepreneurship, it means that you're going to take a scientist, he maybe seem young to you or unexperienced, and put that precious IP that they might have sold to Abbott to this sort of relatively unexperienced person, with the hope that they will, attract investors and will develop the technology and build an actual company around it, so that later on they might partner with those big companies. And the whole ecosystem is not really built for it. And I think slowly, universities are starting to understand the value of entrepreneurship. They look at universities like Stanford and MIT that are notoriously good in providing the ecosystem for scientists to thrive. They build an ecosystem so that the university can benefit from having student entrepreneurs, not necessarily by taking, 30% of their company right off the bat, but in other ways as well. So it's a very slowly changing ecosystem. When I was finishing my PhD, almost 10 years ago, there was one biotech company that all of my Gurdon Institute graduates went to work with, even though they came from completely different labs. But the ecosystem has changed. There are many more companies now, many more opportunities to be working in biotech, to be building in biotech. And we need more of those ecosystems to build to allow for that. Sometimes I'm asked, why do we need, is it because scientists are not good entrepreneurs? Why do you need an ecosystem for them? It's like, no, everyone needs an ecosystem. It's just there are many more advanced ecosystems for people building in tech, right? The amount of accelerators that exist for tech companies, for AI companies, they're enormous, right? From the very good and advanced one to the very sort of smaller and entrepreneurship ones. In this life science ecosystem, founders in life science ecosystem need the same type of support. And they need a very tailored support, because entrepreneurship in life science is very different than entrepreneurship in tech. And if you are an entrepreneur that joining Y Combinator, you will benefit from the name, from the ecosystem, but the majority of content that you'll receive at Y Combinator is not going to be relevant for you. So you'll be spending a lot of your time listening to content and learning and you eventually will have to unlearn what they taught you, because there's no way for you to implement growing your sales month by month or tracking your customers. So you need different approaches in life sciences, and you need content that is tailored to you. Similarly to investor network, right? Most of the investors from tech will not invest in life science. They feel like they don't understand it. They don't understand the biology, the biological risk. They don't understand the business around it. They don't understand the partnerships. And they are very different. Some, brave investors that understand the biology is really the next frontier, take the time and learn, but many do not. And you need that, eventually it takes time to talk to investors, and you want to make sure that you're talking to the right ones. So again, you need that tailored support that I think programs like Nest Catalyst and very few others provide to early stage founders.
So you mentioned, so it was a Nest Catalyst of providing a tailored support for those entrepreneurs. So translate that for me. What does that mean
So
in a
Nest
nutshell?
Catalyst is an entrepreneurship program for early stage life science companies or founders
Uh-huh.
focused on scientist founders, building in the world of life science and technology. So we invite scientists to apply with a already decided sort of technology or sort of some avenue that they already understand what they're building. So it
Yep.
can't be a abstract project. It needs to be something that they understand the biology of and the technology that they want to develop or have developed, right? And many
Mhm.
come with IP from universities. Maybe many develop their own IP around their ideas. And then once we build a cohort, we have a 6-month like program where we invite and very heavily rely on the ecosystem of different advisors and mentors that shed light on the very different aspects of building a company, but in
Uh-huh.
a very tailored way to life sciences. So when we bring investors, it's investors that invest in life sciences. When we bring in advisors on building teams, it's advisors that have built teams in life sciences. Of course, when we bring in lawyers that talk about IP, licensing or IP strategy, it's those that have built in life sciences. So it's all very tailored and specific to founders in life sciences because it's very different. And we want to make sure, our sort of most expensive resource is our time. And I want to make sure that they're focused and spend time on the right things.
Okay, so you're bridging that gap between sort of most likely PhD students
So
looking
it's
to.
usually actually postdocs at the end of their postdoc. So people that are ready to jump into companies. We believe that founders need to be founders full time, especially in the life sciences. So we will not sort of accept a professor that wants to do both. I think it's very difficult. Few can do it, but most, I believe, it's very difficult. So we're actually looking for those either postdocs that are about to finish their postdoc, maybe they already worked in the industry. They really have very deep and unique skill set that really sets them apart in the ability to solve very big problems. Sometimes they come with their PI, as advisors, as scientific co-founders. That's of course a plus, but there need to be a scientist that's going to lead the project. And lead doesn't necessarily mean CEO, although we've seen great CEOs, founders,
Uh-huh.
but they do need to be interested in actually building a business, not just developing a science project.
So you must see some amazing products and innovations
Yeah,
at the cutting edge of science.
exactly.
I think you've got the best job actually, because you vet these new products, and do you decide actually what do you actually evaluate them and
Yeah.
appraise these products, and would you reject any, or would you accept any potential entrepreneur that thinks this product could work? Would you
Oh,
accept
of course.
everybody?
So I wish I could accept everyone and help everyone to bring their technology to where it should be.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, I can't. We do provide very tailored and very sort of hands-on support. For example, in our last cohort, we had 6 companies joining or 6 founders. This cohort, we're hoping to select about 8 to 10. I will see. We vet them out of a very large pool of applications. They tell us about their technologies, the IP that's based on, the team that they've already assembled, how they understand the market, how they understand the product that they're developing. We're bringing advisors to help us evaluate those companies and products and technologies and founders, right? Like, do we really believe that those founders, have the potential to build what they want to be building? And absolutely, we see really exciting technologies. We really see exciting projects. When we were building this, sort of started to think about this program, it was, it's life scientists. They're probably probably working on important stuff. Like, I don't know exactly what, but I'm sure it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
But then when we actually got the applications and see, for example, the companies that came out of our first cohort, we have a company that's solving for gene delivery. Huge unmet need in the industry. We have a company that's providing an affordable and fast, rapid antibiotic susceptibility test that you can understand what antibiotics to use for an infection, not in the 30 percent of sort of richest hospitals in the US, but also in the not so rich ones. So
Yeah.
really important technologies that can really address big, important problems that are stemming from science. And I think it's not surprising, right? Because when we do research in laboratories, even though we like as scientists to say that like we can do whatever, like research whatever we want to research, but in reality, we're actually driven by grants and by others that are vetting the science that we're doing and vetting the directions that we are taking. So many times the science is really needs to be important, and important science translates many times to important products.
Yeah. And so a lot of these entrepreneurs, is one of their biggest constraints funding? Because I mean, you need to develop these products and these companies. A lot of money needs to be thrown at it, right? And if they're PhD students coming out of university, I'm guessing a key part of your job is going to be finding the right funding and investors, maybe to fund these projects into these spin-off startup companies.
We like to think that, but actually, majority of founders that come out of Facebook and Google and, engineers that come out of those companies, they come out with a very specific set of skills and they start companies and they're founders and we all believe that they can do it, right? Like
Hmm.
look at Zuckerberg. Like there are, plethora of examples of founders that have come with a technical background, not necessarily scientific background, but a technical
Hmm.
background without the sort of skills or sort of the knowledge of how to build a company. But that's the essence of being an entrepreneur. You solve those problems as you sort of face them. You
Yeah.
learn how to build a good team around you. You learn how to understand what you need to learn. Entrepreneurs are good learners, and
Mhm.
scientists are definitely fit that model. And scientists are also very good in sort of getting a no or sort of finding out that what they've believed is wrong, but not to get discouraged and actually start again. Another very important quality for entrepreneur. So to your question, yes, funding is definitely a very big problem. It's a problem for an entrepreneur. In life sciences, it depends because when a lot of the time when we think about entrepreneur in life sciences, we think about a drug that will take, you know, 300 to $1 billion to develop in 15 years. If they are building a drug, that's probably true. First, you have the increments, right? Again, as I mentioned before, because you have those many different technologies that were developed to work with life science, work with biology. Now the increments are much smaller. You don't have to raise, $100 million to prove if your drug is working in mice. You can do it with $2 million or with $5 million. So the increments are smaller. You're building confidence in sort of smaller building confidence in smaller increments. And you have also sort of life science companies that are not necessarily develop one drug, right? Platform technologies that can develop, for example, our company doing from our first cohort that's developing gene delivery. So they developed a platform that can work with different drugs that can hold different payloads and can deliver to specific tissues. So the business model there is completely different to developing a drug. Do they need a lot of money to make sure that what they're developing is working in biology? Of course, but it's not the same amount that we were sort of 10 years ago would think about when you think about sort of building in biology.
Fantastic. And can you share any real examples of how an entrepreneur that's used Nest Catalyst and achieved meaningful results?
So through our first cohort, even though when it was really a pilot program, we didn't even know towards what we were sort of advancing. We had 6 teams, and 3 out of those founder scientists, 3, incidentally or not, 3 women scientists built companies. So we have one company in gene delivery, one in the diagnostic, and one company out of the Wyss Institute in exosome isolation, building a device to be sold to different pharma and research labs. And they all, used or benefited from the program differently. We just had a series of events to launch our second cohort. So I had the opportunity to actually interview them on the panels, on an online panel in our event in Boston, and sort of learn from them how they're sort of looking back at their time at the program and what they've benefited from. And it's many different ways. A lot of them met a lot of their investors, advisors, peer founders that played a very pivotal role in their companies through our program. They've built their network. So, if they need to get advice from manufacturing to, first feedback from investors, they get it through our program. They really enjoy the peer support, right? Other scientists going through a similar path. Everyone, no matter how much we sort of align them, they're still at a different stage and sort of have experienced different things, so they can definitely support each other as well. They all very liked our week here in the Bay Area. So at the end of 6 months of an online program, we invite everyone here to the Bay Area and have this very rich full roadshow, as we call it. Really go to different places around the Bay Area, visit Berkeley and UCSF and Stanford and sort of different locations, talk to investors, talk to founders, scientist founders, talk to professors of entrepreneurship, have a pitch event, and it's really an amazing opportunity to meet those people one-on-one. When I was talking in the beginning about sort of not enough scientists are exposed to it, you come here to this very rich ecosystem and you see that everyone are building and everyone are progressing and it's doable. You see a scientist that just finished their, for example, one of our mentors that we loved hosting in the program is Ashley Zanger from Fauna Bio. And there are 3 postdocs that finished the postdoc at Stanford and opened a really exciting company. So we met with her and we heard from her stories. So you see a founder, a scientist that's not very different to you and is very impressive, and they're building a very exciting company. You hear her story, how they fundraised, how they built confidence, how they've built their teams, and you believe that you can do it too.
It must be very fulfilling to when you see that. So it sounds amazing. Yeah. And so with your business, what's the biggest challenges that you face, or bottlenecks that you face in the business today?
So we're still building our own sort of business model, trying to figure out exactly how this will be sort of a sustainable, great business. We're building a fund to be able to invest in the companies that we support. We believe that that's our way to stay aligned with their success. So that's something still ongoing. I'm not a very traditional investor, so still building my own network over there. And we're very strong on community. We believe in community in all the different aspects that it involves, from building to investing to partnering. We very heavily rely on the ecosystem for our program, and we continue to build it. So it's not really a bottleneck, but more an opportunity. And something we always sort of, just this morning, we had a session helping founders to prep for JPM. And it's really about building your network, building the support ecosystem that you can build with and thrive with. And it's something we put a lot of emphasis on.
Okay, good. So it's about finding those new partners that can work with you, and sort of work around you and build those internal networks. Okay, fantastic. And what's different from your company Nest Catalyst that's different to others maybe trying to solve the same problem?
So,
Is there anybody
we're
else doing this, actually? Is the
well,
first question.
there are a few. I would say there are a few that sort of starting to do something similar. I think others have also understood that we need this tailored support and we need sort of a way to help science move forward. I think what's something that sets us apart, besides being very tailored to life sciences, is really having this very, on one hand, very hands-on program where we really work with each founder, continue to build their networks. I continue to make introductions for our founders from, cohort a few years ago. So it's a very sort of hands-on program. We create this very unique and supportive environment that we work very hard on creating and sort of maintaining during the program. But on the other hand, we give them the space to build, because we really, a lot of the programs in life science, there's this model of venture studio and there are different flavors to it, but a lot of it is sort of, I'll tell you how to build it. And I don't think there's this model. I think entrepreneurship as a general, it's this way of building something yourself and figuring it out and leading this process. And I don't think, even for a founding team, usually people would advise to have more than just one founder, because you want to share that mental load of driving that project and sort of understanding all of its aspects. Because when you're getting help from someone, they will only sort of learn one aspect of that company. But as a founder, you hold the whole aspect. So I don't believe that others can hold that aspect for you. So we're at this sort of very fine-tuned balance of helping the founders, but really empowering them so that they can build it. And I think that when they are empowered, then they can really build great companies.
Totally agree. Sounds really good. And where do you see the biggest opportunities for innovation in this space right now?
So I think there's this book that talks about inflection points, and I think in biology it really a compounding inflection points from many different aspects, from the technologies that were developed like CRISPR and sort of gene editing, data analysis, technologies to sort of activate neurons, to read different proteins. There's a lot of has happened from that aspect. You power it with the ecosystem. You have now CROs, you have different services that you can pay others. You can really sort of build a very lean biotech company relying on different ecosystem players. And of course, everything is accelerated by AI these days. So really compounding from the ecosystem, the technology and the AI that is coming together. And I think, all the the AI companies understand it, right? Like you look what Anthropic are doing, what OpenAI are doing. They're leaning very heavily into life sciences because that's the place where this technology is really mostly effective in helping to design, new technology, new solutions. So I think it's a very exciting time to be building in life sciences and sort of using those inflection points to unlock new innovation.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially with AI, with life sciences, yes, there's a lot of focus for a lot of big companies, understandably, because there's a lot of money involved as well. They produce a great diagnostic AI system, so the tests be accurately diagnose patients in half the time. I know for sure it'll be amazing in the UK where waiting times are just crazy. So being able to implement something like that can really have a massive impact on patient outcome ultimately in the end as well. So yeah, we're all very closely watching this space to see what's going to come next.
Yeah, yeah.
So what? Yeah, no, carry on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, on one hand, relying on AI technology to have that diagnostic sort of wand is great. But I think on the other hand, we have to remember that actually, they sort of amplify what we do. And not everything that we do well.
Yeah.
So I think it's a huge challenge of how to design an AI diagnostic tool or anything else that is reliant on our judgment on one hand, but doesn't take all the bad things that we used to do on the other. And I think it's maybe even more philosophical than an engineering problem.
Yes, and the other side of that is at the moment it will always need a human analysis and input.
Mhm.
A human should, as it is, as the technology is today, does need a
Yeah,
human input for assessment.
exactly.
And there is a risk of people just taking it and running with it and just going with what the AI says and not really putting their input into it, thinking and trusting it too much. I don't think it's there yet, but you know, it's moving so fast and so quickly, and there's a lot of money being thrown at it. So who knows
Yeah,
what the
yeah.
future's
It's
going to
hard to
bring?
say.
Yeah. On what stage is Nest Catalyst in right now? And what does growth look like for you over the next 12 months?
So we're launching our second cohort. We're selecting it as we speak, and we're starting to think of the next cohort and sort of what learnings can we learn from the first one. How do we help our founders build the companies and fundraise for them and continue to build? There are actually a lot of interest from other countries to implement our model, so we're thinking about that as well. How
Okay.
can we sort of implement it and sort of copy it to other ecosystems? I think life science is really underutilized everywhere around the world. So we will see more of that coming soon.
What growth channels are currently working well for you at the moment?
I don't know how to translate it to what I do, but we do want to be able to support more founders. I think there's a lot of really interesting innovation out there. Currently, we have to be very selective. We work with this very small group. We're working on ways to be able to sort of help and touch more founders as we go, and continue to think of sort of how to make sure that any scientist that has a very interesting idea and sort of technology can build. I have one example. We have founder in the cohort that every time she talks to me about editing pitch decks for another sort of angel investor, I'm thinking, but you're solving such a huge problem in cancer biology. You shouldn't be worried about another 100K to survive another month. It doesn't make sense. So one of the things I keep thinking about is how do we make sure that our ecosystem, our whole society can really support more innovation in life science? Because I think if you compare it to innovation to almost any other vertical, that's the vertical that not only she wants that company to succeed, but we all want that company to succeed. We all want to have, better drugs for cancer, prevent recurrence of cancer. Really, those solutions, it's not that just the interest of that entrepreneur, it's the interest of the ecosystem, it's the interest of the society. So that sort of questions I tackle a lot and think about how do we make sure that any scientist that wants to translate their research or want to use their skills and knowledge to solve those big problems can and is not focused all the time on fundraising.
So when you max out your next cohort, is the maximum based on your capacity to what you can deliver for these entrepreneurs, or is
Yeah.
it based on another metric?
Yes, it's a sort of a number of companies or a number of founders that we can work with, that we can sort of have have sort of confidence in the level of support that we can provide, right? If I'm running a cohort of 6, or in our case, hopefully 8 companies compared to 30, I just, I can't hold those 30 stories in my mind for in the amount of levels that I'd like to. So I think we're definitely limited by that. Eventually, when we grow and we have more people that can run the programs and can be integral part in helping those programs run, then we can definitely support more founders for sure.
So how can you get to that? How can you get from 8 to 30? What is it that you need to implement to be able to make that growth into those 30 businesses or founders?
It's more about people that care as deeply as I do.
Mhm.
And have the networks and the sort of knowledge and the understanding of ecosystems the way we look at it, and having the funding, having the opportunity to actually hire those people that can lead those programs with the same intensity and the same purpose that we do for the small cohort. Yeah, I think it's a matter of time. I'll get there.
Okay, good. And what's been the toughest part of getting Nest Catalyst into the hands of maybe not so much as the founders because they're coming to you, right?
Well, we find them in many different ways. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you have to work with other companies? Because I've seen that you partner with some biotech companies as well, where the founders do they go and work in those companies, or is it almost like a internship where they may go and help out and learn? Or
So we do have we're building what we call an advisory crew. So it's an opportunity for people from the ecosystem that want to be close to early stage startups and innovation to put themselves out there. So with a lot of things that we do, we see ourselves as facilitators, but we don't enforce. So for example, that advisory crew, it's a curated community of innovators, people from the ecosystem that have built products and brought them to market and sort of have different types of specialities. And they want to be part of this ecosystem. They want to be working with early stage founders. They understand the sort of intricacies of doing that. And we want to make sure that our founders, when they're building and they need advisory teams, they need advisors to develop strategy to one thing or the other, they have that advisory crew very closely to them available so that they know that they can reach out. It's a safe environment. They can get feedback. They can get advice, some for free, some for different types of compensation. But it's there for them, and I think it's a really big bottleneck for our founders. Is sort of how do you build quickly a strong team? A lot of strong founders in the early stage of biotech are relying on the advisors. There's no, if you're thinking about sort of how you will bring your let's say they are developing a therapeutic to market, you don't need a full-time, clinical advisor that will develop your, clinical trial from day one. But you do need that input, and investors that will invest in you will want to know that someone with that relevant experience has looked at what you're doing and helped you to devise a program that makes sense. But it doesn't make sense to hire them full time. So we're bringing those sort of advisory roles very close to our founders so that they can build what they need to be building and not spend too much time or effort in finding those right people.
Brilliant. Well, Elena, that was fantastic. Thank you for that. And where can people learn more about Nest Catalyst or get in touch with you or your team?
LinkedIn is always a good place to start. We also have a website, and we also do a lot of open sort of webinar event. We're going to have a few events at JPM. We're really trying to make sure that any scientist that wants to build in life science have the resources to do it. So, for example, some of our programs, most of our sessions with the program is sort of closed just for the cohort. But we do make an effort to put some of them out there and make it open to the ecosystem to sign up and learn from the experts that we bring to the program, because it's more about just helping our individual founders. It's more about educating the group of scientists that they should at least consider entrepreneurship.
Well, thank you, Elena. Very, very interesting. I'll be keeping a close eye on your progress, and especially these new entrepreneurs coming forward and these exciting products that they'll be bringing to market, hopefully.
Thank you. Thank you so much.